Madison, do we really need your eyes on everything? Colin drawled, waving a thick acquisition binder like he was about to order lunch, not dissect a multi-million-dollar deal. It's operations, not open-heart surgery. He laughed at his own joke. No one else did. Not surprising. First week in the building, and he was already rearranging the office layout, tossing out buzzwords like they were confetti at a venture capital baby shower. He'd come from some rival firm in Boston, convinced the company needed saving from itself. Madison didn't respond. She just sipped her coffee, eyes gliding across the spreadsheet he'd just vandalized with red ink like a toddler with a marker. He hadn't even realized the rollover structure was incomplete. No filing index, no risk clearance. He also hadn't realized she wasn't taking notes because she already knew every cell by heart. They used to call her the Vault when people still had the sense to lower their voices in meetings. 10 years in operations, 7 of those silently patching every strategic hole executives left behind, like a corporate paramedic with a law degree. No applause, no recognition, but when systems buckled, Madison had the repair plan signed and time-stamped before anyone even knew what broke. Then Colin strolled in, fresh haircut, sharp suit, ego swinging like a wrecking ball. He called her ops girl in front of an intern. He slashed her project list to focus her talents. He even flagged her bonus for reevaluation. He didn't fire her. He did worse. He erased her presence. That Friday, Madison discovered she'd been quietly uninvited from the acquisition planning session. Her name disappeared from the invite chain. The private equity firm, her own contact, had gone radio silent. Colin called it streamlining. He said the word like it was a prayer, not a knife. Madison didn't protest. She simply took her nameplate off the glass conference room door and returned to her desk. Calm, controlled, but something inside her shifted. She opened a buried folder deep within the access control system. Internal Clearance Conditional Triggers V2.1. Her initials, MC, were tagged beside a clause she'd authored 4 years ago during a compliance overhaul no one else had cared about. It was the kind of clause you never needed, until someone made a mistake. Across the room, Colin laughed too loud at his own quip. Madison clicked a single checkbox. Validator token active, assigned certifier. No one noticed. By Monday, something had changed in the air. Her old team felt it first. Junior staff began drifting toward her desk, quietly asking whether they should sign off on reports they didn't write. Madison's answers came as subtle nods or measured silences that carried weight. She didn't need authority. She had gravity. Over lunch, she paused by the break room where Colin had pinned up his new quarterly roadmap. Her name wasn't anywhere on it, but the logo of the private equity firm Ridgewater Holdings was. That logo was hers, her relationship. She'd built it from scratch. She still remembered sitting in Ridgewater's Manhattan office years earlier, across from a vice president who refused to shake hands with operations staff. 30 minutes later, after she found a $400,000 accounting error in his deck, he'd said flatly, "We trust your numbers, not your bosses." Now that trust was being tested. Madison returned to her desk and opened a blank document titled Clause 8.1, Contingency Timeline, Unvalidated Triggers. At the top, she typed in bold, "If they cut you out of the meeting, make sure they can't close the deal without you." By midweek, the office felt like a wake for competence. Boxes rolled past like pallbearers. 3 directors gone before noon. 2 VPs transitioned into consulting roles, polite corporate code for get out before Friday. Their replacements swaggered in smelling like cologne and recycled ideas. One actually high-fived the receptionist. Another called the monthly forecast cute and suggested renaming it the Big Boy Budget. Madison didn't flinch. She just adjusted her headset, minimized her dashboards, and kept working. By Thursday, her calendar was stripped bare. Projects she'd led for 8 years vanished. Threads she'd started looked like ghost towns. Instead of warning her, Colin reassigned her work piecemeal, slicing her responsibilities like a Thanksgiving turkey and tossing her the bones. Her access to the vendor portal was downgraded to read-only. When she flagged a double billing issue, the reply came from some new analyst named Alyssa. A shrugging emoji, lowercase message, no punctuation. The final insult came when the internal tracker listed her role as administrative oversight. Optional. Optional. Madison didn't rage. She didn't cry. She just exhaled once, slow and quiet, then clicked into a legacy folder she hadn't touched since the last acquisition. Ops internal controls, legacy, clauses, cert tokens. She scrolled to one line, validator assignment, legacy systems only, and added 3 words, token.mc, exclusive. Then she archived the changelog, encrypted the file, and backed up a soft copy to her personal drive. That tiny edit seemed harmless, just legacy language, but it was a fuse, and Colin had already lit the match. Over the next week, Madison built her private archive like a forensic log. Every meeting she was removed from, every email thread that went silent, every spreadsheet modified without her review. She didn't editorialize, she documented, cold, precise, like a scientist observing an outbreak before the symptoms hit the wider population. It wasn't paranoia, it was pattern recognition. Madison understood that men like Colin didn't fall. They overreached. All she had to do was make sure the floor beneath him was made of glass. By Thursday afternoon, word spread that her title was being realigned. The HR memo hit inboxes at 3:12 p.m. flat. In pursuit of greater synergy across departments, Madison Carter will transition to a support capacity during the Ridgewater acquisition period. Support capacity. That was code for, keep her quiet until this is over. Madison didn't even open the attachment. She just minimized the window and sipped her tea. The following Monday, she arrived early, earlier than anyone. Empty floors, humming lights, a kingdom of silence. She opened the system registry again, navigating through subfolders like a surgeon tracing an artery. Inside Ops Legacy Protocols, she found the clause she'd written years ago. Final validation on legacy M&A transactions must be certified by a signed token holder. Single-point sign-off. No override permitted without written countersignature from the originating certifier. She read it once, smiled faintly, and added a single time-stamped line. Clause active. Certifier. MC, token ID, 727A. Then she closed the folder, slid back her chair, and went about her day as though nothing had changed. That afternoon, Colin strutted through the open office like a man hosting his own coronation. He loved to hold stand-up meetings with the glass doors wide open, so everyone could hear his voice bounce off the walls. "We're eliminating old redundancies," he declared to his new crew. "We're moving fast. No more bottlenecks." He called Madison's steady hands in passing, the way someone thanks a bartender after last call. She nodded once and said softly, "No longer my lane." He smiled, pleased with himself. That was the moment she knew, officially invisible. But invisibility had its perks. She could move unseen. When Colin called the next meeting, he said it loud enough for everyone to hear. "This one's for partners. Madison, hang back at your desk." He smirked like he'd just delivered a punchline. A few of the new analysts laughed nervously. Madison didn't blink. She stirred honey into her tea, unbothered, the calm before the audit storm. 15 minutes later, Jamie, one of the last veterans still hanging on in accounting, slipped out of the meeting room and dropped a single-page printout on her desk. "Need a quick look," he whispered. $10 million vendor invoice. Colin wants it cleared today. Madison glanced down. Vendor routing, asset category, performance holdback, all standard, until she reached the bottom. The validator field was blank. Her throat didn't tighten. Her heart didn't race. She just stared at it, expression neutral. That field wasn't auto-filled for transactions over 7 figures. It had to be certified manually. Her ID should have been there, but it wasn't. And the signature above? Colin's initials, big, uneven, and desperate, like a kid forging his parents' name on a permission slip. Madison read it twice, then slid the page back toward Jamie. "You good?" he asked, puzzled. "All yours." she said quietly. He shrugged and went back into the room. Madison opened her unvalidated triggers log, scrolled to the bottom, and added a new line. Invoice 44B 10. No token ID. Colin initialed at 11:37 a.m. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. For a moment, she considered flagging it to internal audit. A single anonymous note could have triggered the compliance review early. But no, not yet. Let him keep walking toward the cliff. Let the system do the talking. By the end of the week, Colin had a new spring in his step. He'd replaced the risk meeting slides with Canva graphics and buzzwords like agile velocity. He wore his confidence like armor, not realizing it was paper thin. Madison spent that week quietly auditing the validator logs. One active certifier, token 727A, MC. No overrides, no backups. The system belonged to her. On Friday, HR's performance note arrived. No subject line, just the kind of passive-aggressive memo HR people write when they're too timid to pick a side. Appears disengaged, struggling to adapt to strategic realignment, reluctant to assume new roles. She read it 3 times, smirked once, and closed the tab. She didn't even archive it, just added a line to her log. 9:16 a.m. Performance watch initiated. Then she opened another file. Validator loop. Red flag pings. None yet. But they would come. By Monday morning, Madison arrived at her desk before dawn. The office was silent except for the buzz of the HVAC and the hum of distant city traffic. The kind of early that makes people wonder if you ever left the building. She liked it that way. No witnesses, no noise, just time. At 6:43 a.m., a system alert blinked onto her screen. Subject: Validation, Exception, Certifier Flag, ID 727A. She clicked it open. System note: Transaction, Vendor Invoice 44B. Amount $10,000. Clearance attempted 03:14 a.m. by user CR. Colin Reynolds. Status: Incomplete. Missing required validator token holder, MC 727A. Exception: Class B. Follow-up pending compliance notification. Madison didn't react outwardly. Her pulse stayed steady. She took a slow sip of her coffee, minimized the alert, and opened her private log. New entry: 6:43 a.m. System ping: 10 mm. Invoice processed, but not cleared. She didn't forward the message. She didn't flag it. The system had already spoken. And unlike people, systems didn't lie. Across the hall, Colin's voice boomed out of his glass office, loud enough to rattle the light fixtures. "Compliance is baked in," he was saying to someone on a speakerphone. Probably one of the junior execs from Ridgewater, too polite, or too terrified, to interrupt. "We're not over-engineering approvals here. We're agile. We're lean. We move fast." Madison watched him through the reflection on her monitor. One hand in his pocket, chin tilted high, like he was posing for a LinkedIn headshot titled Visionary in Motion. In his other hand, he held the same folder, the Ridgewater deal packet, the one that had once sat on her desk. She didn't wave. She didn't interrupt. She just reopened the transaction flow log. The invoice was marked processed overnight by accounting, likely a cleanup push before the board's end-of-month review. But the status was still glowing red. Final status: uncleared. Awaiting validator token, 727A. She smiled faintly. 4 failed override attempts from Colin's account, all logged, all time-stamped. It was perfect. Not malicious, just arithmetic. By noon, whispers rippled through operations. Something about a delay in finance. Jasmine, one of the newer analysts, approached her desk with wide eyes. "I heard finance is freaking out," she said under her breath. Madison didn't look up. "Are they?" Jasmine nodded. "They say there's a processing delay. Colin's blaming infrastructure." Madison finally took a sip of her tea. Well, she said, calm as glass, maybe he should try turning it off and on again. Jasmine blinked, unsure whether it was a joke. Madison went back to typing. An hour later, another ping. This time from a console she hadn't touched in weeks. The Legacy Compliance Dashboard. A new message blinked in amber. Audit trigger. Escalated. PE review flagged for manual intervention. That was her clause. The buried one. 3 submenus deep. She leaned back in her chair. The clause read, if any transaction exceeding $5 million fails to receive clearance from a single-point validator, the system shall escalate to intervention status and freeze all dependent actions pending manual review. And now it had triggered. That meant 2 people could unlock the freeze. The originating certifier, Madison, or the board. She added a line to her log. Intervention status triggered. Board notification pending. Sisters 72 HRs. Then she closed her laptop and let silence settle around her like armor. She didn't need to raise her voice. The system was doing it for her. By the next morning, Colin was in full performance mode. He strutted through the hallway, barking half-sentences into his Bluetooth headset, slapping backs, laughing too loud. Full synergy alignment, operational green light, endgame momentum. He sounded like a motivational podcast trapped in human form. At 9:03 a.m., a company-wide email landed in every inbox. Subject, final acquisition status. From Colin Reynolds, COO. Body, proud to share that all compliance steps are complete. We're on track for final close with Ridgewater Holdings by end of week. Huge thanks to our new Agile Ops team for pushing this across the finish line. Let's keep momentum high. Colin Madison read it twice, expression blank. Then she refreshed the validator dashboard. Still red. Invoice 44B uncleared, certifier 727A. Override attempts 6. Last attempt 08:14 a.m. Result? Signature mismatch. He'd just told the investors it was done. Her lips twitched. He wasn't just arrogant. He was radioactive. At 10:17 a.m., Madison's encrypted inbox pinged. A message from Ridgewater Holdings. The subject line was short and sharp. Final validation certificate. Status inquiry. She opened it. The email was from Mark Penner, senior partner, a man who'd once called her the only person in that company who speaks fluent integrity. Madison, it read. We received confirmation from your team that all validations are complete before releasing the final tranche. Need your certifier signature for compliance verification. Can you confirm validation? Mark Madison stared at the message for a full minute before typing her reply, every word like a scalpel. Mark, I cannot confirm validation. Attached. Memo outlining Clause 8.1. Single Point Certifier Protocol. My token remains active. No clearance has been authorized. MC. She attached the memo she'd drafted years ago. 2 pages. Elegant. Surgical. Terrifying in its precision. Clause 8.1. Single Point Certifier Protocol. In any merger, acquisition, or asset transfer exceeding $5 million, where internal validation systems are subject to restructuring, a Single Point Certifier, SPC, may be designated to preserve compliance chain of custody. The SPC must issue a final digital clearance using a non-transferable system token. Failure to secure SPC clearance will automatically freeze the transaction and trigger board-level review. At the bottom, one name gleamed in the metadata, certifier on record, Madison Carter, token 727A. She didn't copy Colin, she didn't loop in legal, she didn't have to. The moment Mark read that memo, the fuse would hit the detonator. At 11:12 a.m., her screen flashed a red receipt. 3 minutes later, her phone lit up with an unlisted call. She ignored it. Instead, she texted Mark 3 words, chain of custody. Then she locked her screen and stood up. Across the hall, through the glass, Colin was mid-call, pacing like a caged animal. His face was flushed. His voice carried. No! She's not even involved anymore! That role's deprecated. It's been sunset. He gestured wildly. The phone pressed tight to his ear. I'm telling you, we're green across the board. He turned just as Madison passed by his door and gave her a thumbs up, oblivious. She gave a faint nod, the kind you might give to a man about to walk into traffic. By 2:47 p.m., the system triggered another automated notice. Subject: intervention, hold executed. Board notification initiated. Details: transaction ID 44B. Status: frozen. Awaiting certifier 727A or board vote. She didn't smile. She didn't frown. She just wrote one line in her log. 2:47 p.m. Full system lock engaged. Escalation active. The next morning, tension spread through the office like a gas leak. Nobody knew what had gone wrong, but everyone could smell it. The suits from the top floor suddenly dropped by operations, pretending to check workflows while whispering to each other like hostages negotiating their escape. Even the office plants looked wilted. At 8 a.m. sharp, the final Ridgewater closing call began. Cameras on. Smiles fake. Madison wasn't invited. She wasn't mentioned. But her name was about to crash the party. At 8:17 a.m., a voice cut through the video conference. Before we proceed, said Jennifer Shue, Ridgewater's in-house counsel. Calm, crisp, lethal. We've encountered an obstruction on your side. Colin blinked, still mid-smirk. An obstruction? From who? Jennifer didn't blink. From your internal system. She tapped a few keys. On the shared screen appeared a frozen field in their acquisition portal. Certifier validation required. Below it, one name. Madison Carter. Token ID 727A. A second box popped up. Clause 8.1. Single point certifier protocol invoked. Transaction ID 44B. Amount $10,000. Status? Uncleared. Risk sign-off. Blocked. We cannot proceed under intervention lock. Jennifer continued evenly. The certifier's token is still active. No override permissions exist. The blood drained from Colin's face. That's a technical glitch, he stammered. Legacy protocol. Not even part of the deal anymore. Jennifer's tone sharpened like glass. Legacy or not, it's binding. And for the record. She paused just long enough to twist the knife. You attempted override 6 times. Each one failed. On screen, the system log expanded for everyone to see. Override 1, C. Reynolds, rejected override 2. C. Reynolds, rejected override 6. C. Reynolds, rejected. The silence that followed could have swallowed the building whole. Mark Penner unmuted his microphone. His voice came through the conference line cool, steady, and lethal in its professionalism. Colin, he said, I was informed that compliance was complete. Clearly, that was inaccurate. What exactly did you plan to do if the system had let this through? Colin swallowed audibly, face blotched red. We assumed the token had expired. The certifier role was sunset. She's not active anymore. Mark's tone iced over. Funny. She replied to my email yesterday with a memo. Yours, however, went unanswered. The silence stretched like a blade. Colin finally croaked. Okay, give me 5 minutes. I can fix this. No, Jennifer Shue interrupted flatly. You can't. You're not the certifier. You are not authorized to fix anything. 3 floors below, Madison refreshed her dashboard, watching the chaos unfold like a chess player observing from the balcony. The system status line blinked steady red. Clause 8.1, lock engaged. Last override, 8:18 a.m. Result, permission denied. Moments later, the company's Slack channels began to explode. Threads titled Urgent, Madison token still active and who gave her certifier rights, flooded her screen. Someone wrote, Martin said she signed off months ago. Another replied, Is this going to delay closing? We already booked the revenue. Madison opened her private log and typed one new line. 8:22 a.m. Full system halt. Executive escalation imminent. Upstairs, Colin was pacing in frantic circles. There has to be a way to remove her token manually, he barked. Can't it just override it? Jennifer let out a short, humorless laugh. Manual override of a single-point certifier token constitutes a Sarbanes-Oxley violation. You want me to read you the statute or forward it to Ridgewater's attorneys? The color drained completely from his face. The line went quiet again, long enough for everyone on the call to realize exactly how deep he was buried. By 10:03 a.m., Madison's phone rang. Not from Ridgewater, not from legal. From the board. She let it ring twice before answering. Madison? Said the crisp voice on the other end. Lydia Stone, chairwoman of the board. The kind of executive who could smell rot under fresh paint and cut through it without blinking. We have a situation. So I've heard, Madison replied, voice calm, even warm. We're looking at a total freeze on the Ridgewater acquisition. Their legal team is displeased. Lydia's tone was razor thin. We understand you are, at present, the only certifier who can authorize clearance. Is that correct? It is. We'd like to bring you in immediately as a consultant, Lydia said. Compensated, of course. Madison didn't hesitate. My rate applies. There was a pause. Lydia adapted instantly. Understood. What does that rate look like? 25,000. Per month? Per day. Another beat of silence. Then Lydia exhaled. Fine. And what else? I'll require board access through the remainder of the quarter, Madison said evenly. Observation rights, attendance at all strategic sessions, permission to speak when addressed. Not a voting seat? Not yet. Lydia didn't argue. Send your terms in writing. We'll have legal draft the NDA within the hour. I already have the email open, Madison said. By 10:14 a.m., the reply came back. One word. Agreed. At 10:20, an emergency board session was called. No Outlook placeholder. No agenda. Just a subject line. Ridgewater compliance lock. Critical. Madison was patched in remotely. No video. Just her name in small, unassuming font on the massive flat screen at the front of the boardroom. Colin was already there. Tie loosened, eyes bloodshot, flanked by two of his hand-picked executives who looked like they hadn't slept in days. Lydia entered last, tablet under one arm, expression carved in ice. She took her seat at the head of the table. Please leave the room, she said to Colin without looking up. He froze. I'm the acting COO. Lydia looked him dead in the eye. You oversaw the single worst compliance failure we've had in a decade. You're not needed in this discussion. We'll call you when we are. He hesitated, then stood, shoulders stiff, face pale, and walked out of the boardroom like a man being escorted to his own exit interview. A soft tone signaled the remote connection unmuting. Madison's voice filled the room, calm and measured. I'm here. Thank you, Madison, Lydia said, her tone clipped but controlled. For the record, Ms. Carter holds the sole validation token required to finalize the Ridgewater acquisition. She's agreed to re-engage as a consultant, effective immediately, at $25,000 per day. A few board members exchanged looks, disbelief mixed with reluctant admiration, but no one objected. Everyone in that room had seen the logs. Everyone had read Ridgewater's statement. Transaction frozen pending certifier clearance, and everyone had watched Colin melt down like butter on a griddle. One director cleared his throat. Ms. Carter, would you be willing to authorize the transaction now? Madison's voice came steady through the speaker. Not yet. I'll need to review the documentation properly. Lydia nodded once. Then we wait. Get her everything she needs. Across the building, Colin sat in a smaller conference room alone, staring blankly at his phone. Slack notifications rolled in like waves. Urgent. Critical. Fix ASAP. But there was nothing he could do. He didn't know that Ridgewater's internal memo already contained a line that read, "Leadership either unaware of internal control structures or willing to falsify compliance clearance to expedite closing. Both scenarios unacceptable." He didn't know that Lydia had already flagged his personnel file with a quiet but terminal note. Confidence lost. 2 floors below, Madison swiped her keycard at the compliance server room for the first time in 42 days. The lock beeped green. Inside, rows of humming machines cast pale blue light across the steel floor. She walked slowly between the racks, tracing her fingertips over the edge of the mainframe casing like a surgeon preparing for an operation. There was no speech, no dramatic music, no "I told you so," just precision. She accessed the console, authenticated her token, and entered her verification phrase. Certifier 727A. Active. The system prompted, "Authorize transaction 44B?" Madison typed 3 words. "Pending board confirmation." The lock stayed engaged. Then she closed the terminal, pocketed her card, and left the room. The emergency board call was set for 4:00 p.m. sharp. No PowerPoint slides, no branding, just a subject line. Ridgewater critical stop. At 3:55. Every executive was already seated. The CFO looked hollow, his elbows on the table, hands steepled like he was praying for divine intervention. Legal counsel joined from D.C. via video, faces pale and pinched. Lydia sat dead center at the table, her tablet glowing faintly, eyes sharp enough to cut marble. At 4:01, the final participant joined the call. Thomas Gale, CEO, recently tanned from a strategic wellness retreat in the Mediterranean. He wore an open-collar linen shirt and the smug confidence of a man used to walking into applause. "All right," he said cheerfully, sipping from a bottle of coconut water. "Let's land this bird." No one smiled. Lydia spoke first. "Tom, the Ridgewater acquisition is frozen." He blinked, taken off guard. "Frozen? What do you mean, frozen?" "Colin sent out the green light email yesterday." The CFO's voice was low and controlled. "He overrode the clearance protocol. The system rejected the transaction. The final $10 million tranche is locked." Thomas lowered his sunglasses slowly, squinting at the camera. "Wait, what? Why the hell didn't we fix that already?" "Because," said the CFO, with the exhausted calm of a man too old for this circus, "the only authorized certifier declined." For the first time, the CEO's face lost its tan glow. "I'm sorry. Who?" Lydia didn't answer. She simply tapped her tablet. The main display behind her flickered, updating to show one name in bold white font across a black background. "Madison Carter, certifier. Clause 8.1 active." Thomas exhaled sharply. Please tell me you paid her." There was silence. Then a soft electronic chime signaled another participant joining the call. "I'm here," Madison said. Her tone was calm, almost serene, as if she hadn't just brought a multi-million-dollar operation to its knees. Thomas straightened in his chair. "Madison, look, I wasn't aware you were still engaged on this deal. Clearly there's been some miscommunication." "There's no miscommunication," she said smoothly. "There's just Colin, and a memo you never read." He opened his mouth, then shut it again. The room went still. Madison continued, voice crisp as paper. "You want the validation? You'll have it. One condition." Lydia's eyes narrowed slightly. "Name it." Madison didn't hesitate. "My seat. Permanent." The silence that followed could have cracked glass. No one moved. No one even breathed. Across the table, Thomas looked around, as if someone off camera might save him from his own negligence. No one did. Finally, Lydia leaned forward, elbows on the polished walnut table, her voice calm and surgical. "Done. she said, effective immediately. Welcome to the board, Ms. Carter. Madison's reply was simple. Then I'll validate now. She didn't gloat, didn't smile. She opened her secure terminal, entered her certifier key, and pressed authorize. One line of code, one digital signature, and the Ridgewater deal came roaring back to life. System notice. Transaction 44B. Cleared. Compliance verified. Audit trail locked. The CFO glanced down at his screen, eyes wide. It's live, he said quietly. Jennifer Shue from Ridgewater nodded through the video feed. Confirmed. Clearance received. Funds will release in 48 hours. Lydia gave a single curt nod. Thank you, Madison. That will be all. But Madison didn't leave the call. She muted herself, listening to the last 5 minutes of damage control as the executives scrambled to rewrite the narrative. Not one of them said Colin's name. They didn't have to. His downfall was already carved into the record. By 4:17 p.m., the call ended. The boardroom lights dimmed. Lydia closed her tablet and stood. Across the building, Colin sat slumped in a chair, staring blankly at a Slack message that read, Board request. Immediate meeting with HR. He didn't reply. He couldn't. News travels fast in corporate corridors. Faster than logic, faster than shame. By the time Madison returned to her desk, half the company already knew. The woman they'd quietly sidelined, erased from calendars and copied off threads, had just been elevated above the man who erased her. She moved like nothing had changed. Set her bag down, refilled her coffee, sat. Then she opened a new file and titled it Board Session 1, Notes. The cursor blinked against the blank page, and for the first time in months, she allowed herself to smile. Small, private, precise. Outside her glass partition, junior analysts passed by whispering. One mouthed, "She did it." Another just stared, wide-eyed. Madison typed the first line of her notes. "You told me to hang back." Her fingers hovered above the keyboard for a moment. Then she added, "I did, and look where it got me." She hit save. A few hours later, Lydia's assistant forwarded her the formal confirmation. Board appointment, Madison Carter, non-voting advisor, Q2 term, extension option Q3. Attached was her daily consulting agreement, approved and executed, $25,000 per day. She didn't even open the PDF. She already knew every clause. The next morning, HR announced organizational adjustments. Colin Reynolds had chosen to pursue new opportunities. His profile vanished from the internal directory by noon. The same interns who once laughed at his jokes were now scrubbing his name off the org chart. Madison didn't comment. She didn't have to. The system had done what it was built to do. Enforce truth, not ego. By Thursday, Ridgewater's press release hit the wire. Following an internal compliance review, Horizon Systems finalized its acquisition with Ridgewater Holdings under renewed governance oversight led by board appointee Madison Carter. The photo attached wasn't her idea, but Lydia had insisted. Madison stood at the edge of the board table, expression composed, eyes direct. No filters, no slogans, just calm authority. That evening, as the office emptied, she stayed behind. The building was quiet again. The kind of quiet she liked. She poured one last cup of coffee, stood by the window, and watched the city flicker alive below. In her inbox sat an email from Mark Penner. Told you they'd need you again. Congratulations, board member Carter. She replied with a single line. Not revenge, Mark, just math. When she closed her laptop, she caught her reflection in the glass. The same face they'd overlooked for years, steady, unreadable, untouchable. She smiled once more and whispered, almost to herself, "You told me to stay back." Her eyes narrowed, voice low, resolute, "And I took your seat." Then she turned off the lights and walked out. Silent, composed, victorious.